Hello. So, with Jeremy Hunt talking about effing off and, and increasing the range of vocabulary or acceptable vocabulary in the House of Commons, it's time to get back to the budget. Now, let me do a sort of recap of where I think we are with the budget, and I'm sort of moving on. I'm a survey of the whole thing because I've listened to the whole thing. I think there's five major points of positivity. If, for example, you are involved in property development, if you're not, I don't think there's very much to take away from this. Uh, if you've got a small business and you're worried that you might be creeping towards VAT registration, that you might be getting towards a turnover of £85,000, that's now been raised to £90,000. So the problem of having to fork out 20% tax, but the whole VAT thing comes with tax refunds as well. You can claim that VAT back. It's a bother. You have to pay an accountant, but VAT is swings and roundabouts, swings and balances, and I'm not sure that's a big bonus. The capital gains tax, if you're a property development, is very useful. Selling your house selling your house when you sell property in general, the higher rate is currently 28%. That's now been brought down to 24%. It makes it easier. It makes it less painful to sell a house, particularly one which isn't the property you're living in. It's good for property investors. Scrapping multiple dwelling relief, that's in apartment blocks. It's something that was used to avoid stamp duty, maybe, with claims that it's been abused. Again, it's a reform. It's tidying up a problem. I don't think it's going to be a great crisis if you're in property development. It's not going to be. It's neither here nor there. Furnished holiday lets might be a problem. This is something that people have used to offset mortgage payments. It's tax deductible. Now that's scrapped. That may be a problem. Reducing national insurance for self-employed and unemployed people, effectively putting £450 or 300 odd pounds back into your pocket because you're not paying national insurance. Well, again, it sounds positive. I don't think it's as positive as it actually appears to be. There's no major change. Now, with that national insurance thing, there's a sort of hint here that Mr. Hunt may be indicating that the Conservative Party will plan to scrap national insurance altogether at the next election. There is a belief that if you pay your national insurance, you're therefore investing in the NHS and investing in public services. You're not. There's no tax in the UK which is ring fenced for any particular purpose. So if you're not paying national insurance, yes, if the government isn't collecting national insurance, it may be short of a few £1 billion, but it may make that up from somewhere else. So what the Conservative government may be planning in an election manifesto is to simplify the tax process, which would mean you're not paying your accountant so much money. That would be a positive, I suppose. Bring it on, says Starmer at the end of his speech. Bring it on. Name the day as May the 2nd at the end of his speech. But although Labour is very gung-ho about the next election, I don't think it should be too positive about an early spring election, because an early spring election would play into the hands now both of Rishi Sunak's fear basis and of George Galloway's rhetoric, both drawing on this Islamicist trope, with Galloway looking for the Muslim vote, and Sunak and the hordes of Tufton right-wingers claiming that there is a genuine Islamicist movement. That is, a movement of Islamic religious adherents who want to establish a caliphate in the UK. I don't think this is credible. This is it's possible to think of an Islamicist society, of ISIS, of Hamas, of the Ayatollah's Iran, but it isn't happening here in the UK. This is simply a bogeyman that's been invoked, and I don't believe it. I'm afraid. But a simplified tax system would be a positive, and I think again that's gearing up to an election to say we are the party of tax abolition, and the Labour Party, are the party of increasing tax. But all the Labour Party has to do is cite the fact that we don't feel any better off at the moment, that we feel we are being overtaxed. And even if the OBR, I think the OBR is now saying that there's a possibility that inflation will come down to 2% in the next few months, that would be a major plus if Sunak can wait that long. But if this is the best that Hunt can do, I don't see that Sunak has grounds to put faith in the Hunt optimism. It's just not that spectacular. The overall picture, as I say, is that we feel poor no matter how many taxes are cut. And 400 odd pounds in your pocket saved from national insurance doesn't replace the 400 extra pounds that you're paying for your mortgage, doesn't replace the inflated energy expenses, doesn't replace the fact that you've got to find some other way of getting up to London because the trains are on strike. It doesn't replace all that. It doesn't replace the anxiety about the NHS and the general cost of living crisis that dominates our thinking when our public services are decaying by the minute. When just down the road in Birmingham from me, they're now thinking of abolishing public libraries and abolishing any form of subsidy and support for the arts. Well, the arts tell us whether or not a society is functioning and comfortable. And if the arts are being abolished, then our society is not functioning and comfortable. Energy prices are going up. A standard of living is going down. And anyway, let's have a look at the second part of the budget and see where Mr. Hunt goes after being so effing pleased with education. I think, as I say, Mr. Hunt is a joy to linguistic development, isn't he?
Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Good public services need a strong economy to pay for them, but a strong economy also needs good public services. In 2010, schools in the UK were behind Germany, France and Sweden in the OECD's PISA education rankings for reading and maths. Now, after Conservative reforms, we are ahead of them. Burglaries and violent crime have halved in the last 14 years after we invested in 20,000 more police officers. Our armed forces remain the most professional and best funded in Europe. With defence spending already more than 2% of GDP, we're providing more military support to Ukraine than nearly any other country, and our spending will rise to 2.5% as soon as economic conditions allow. The NHS is still recovering from the pandemic, but has 42,000 more doctors and 71,000 more nurses than it did under Labour. That is 250 more doctors and 400 more nurses for every single month that we've been in office. Now, resources matter, of course, which is why, despite all the economic shocks we have faced, overall spending on public services has gone up since 2010, in the case of the NHS by more than a third in real terms. But although spending has continued to rise every year, public sector productivity still remains below pre-pandemic levels by nearly 6%. This demonstrates that the way to improve public services is not always more money or more people. We also need to run them more efficiently. We need a more productive state, not a bigger state. In autumn 2022, I set day-to-day spending to increase by 1% a year in real terms over the next Parliament. Some say that's not enough and we should raise spending by more. Others say it's too much and we should cut it to improve efficiency. Neither are right. It's not fair to ask taxpayers to pay for more when public service productivity has fallen. Nor would it be wise to reduce that funding given the pressures public services face. So I'm keeping the planned growth in day-to-day spending at 1% in real terms, but we are going to spend it better. So today, they don't have a plan for public services, like everything else. So why not listen to ours? Today I am announcing a landmark public sector productivity plan that restarts public service reform and changes the Treasury's traditional approach to public spending. And I start with our biggest and most important public service, the NHS. One of my greatest privileges was to be Health Secretary. Thanks to the NHS, I have 3 gorgeous children, the oldest of whom has been patiently listening in the gallery. The NHS is rightly the biggest reason most of us are proud to be British, but the systems that support its staff are often antiquated. Doctors, nurses, and ward staff spend hours every day filling out forms when they could be...
Mr. Streeting.
When patients don't show up...
I don't like to interrupt the Chancellor. You're too close to me to be shouting that loudly. If you want to shout that loudly, you should consider way up there. I apologise for interrupting the Chancellor.
When patients don't show up, or one member of a team is ill, operating theatres are left empty despite long waiting lists. Now, when we published the NHS long-term workforce plan, I asked the NHS to put together a plan to transform its efficiency and productivity. I wanted better care for patients, more job satisfaction for staff, and better value for taxpayers. Making changes on the scale we need is not cheap. The investment needed to modernise NHS IT systems so they're as good as the best in the world costs £3.4 billion. But it helps unlock £35 billion of savings, 10 times that amount. So in today's budget for long-term growth, I have decided to fund the NHS productivity plan in full. With that new investment, we will slash the 13 million hours lost by doctors and nurses every year to outdated IT systems. We will cut down and potentially halve form filling by doctors using AI. We will digitise operating theatre processes, allowing the same number of consultants to do an extra 200,000 operations a year. We'll fund improvements to help doctors read MRI and CT scans more accurately and quickly, speeding up results for 130,000 patients every year and saving thousands of lives, something I know would have delighted my brother Charlie, who I recently lost to cancer. We'll improve the NHS app so it can be used to confirm and modify all appointments, reducing up to half 500,000 missed appointments annually and improving patient choice. We'll set up a new NHS staff app to make it easier to roster electronically and then the use of expensive off-framework agencies. And as a result of this funding, all hospitals will use electronic patient records, making the NHS the largest digitally integrated healthcare system in the world. Today's announcement doubles the amount the NHS is investing on digital transformation over 3 years. And on top of this longer-term transformation, we'll also help the NHS meet pressures in the coming year with an additional £2.5 billion. This will allow the NHS to continue its focus on reducing waiting times and brings the total increase in NHS funding since the start of the Parliament to 13% in real terms. The NHS was there for us in the pandemic, and today, with nearly £6 billion of additional funding, a Conservative government is there for the NHS. The head of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard, today says that this investment shows the government continues to back the NHS. She says that as a result of it, the NHS can commit to delivering 1.9% annual productivity growth over the next Parliament, more than double the average productivity growth in public services between 2010 and 2019. But today is not just about the NHS. I want this groundbreaking agreement with the NHS to be a model for all our public services. Across education, the police, the courts, and local government, I want to see more efficient, better value, and higher quality public services. So today I can announce that in the next spending review, the Treasury will do things differently. We will prioritise proposals that deliver annual savings within 5 years, equivalent to the total cost of the investment required. And today we make a start with some excellent proposals. Violence reduction units and hotspot policing have prevented an estimated 136,000 knife crimes and other violent offences, as well as over 3,000 hospital admissions. Every crime costs money, so we will provide £75 million to roll that model out in England and Wales. Police officers waste around 8 hours a week on unnecessary admin. With higher productivity, we could free the equivalent of 20,000 police officers over a year. So we will spend £230 million rolling out time and money-saving technology, which speeds up police response times by allowing people to report crimes by video call and, where appropriate, use drones as first responders. Too many legal cases, particularly in family law, should never go to court, and it would cost us less if they didn't. So we'll spend £170 million to fund non-court resolution, reduce reoffending, and digitise the court process. Too many children in care end up being looked after by unregistered providers that are much more expensive. So we'll invest £165 million over the next 4 years to reduce that cost by increasing the capacity of the Children's Homes estate. Special education need provision can be excellent when outsourced to independent sector schools, but also expensive. So we'll invest £105 million over the next 4 years to build 50 new special free schools to create additional high-quality places and increase choice for parents. And we'll also put in place a plan to realise the tens of billions of savings recommended in an excellent speech by the head of the National Audit Office. The OBR say a 5% increase in public sector productivity will be the equivalent of around £20 billion in extra funding. With these plans, we can deliver that and more. And if we ensure they are cash-releasing savings, as we are committed to doing, it will be possible to live with more constrained spending growth without cutting services valued by the public. So with the energy and drive of my talented Chief Secretary to the Treasury, we launch our public sector productivity plan in today's budget for long-term growth, more investment, more jobs, better public services, and one more thing, lower taxes. Keeping taxes down matters to Conservatives in a way it never can for Labour. We believe that in a free society, the money you earn doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to you. And if we want to encourage hard work, we should let people keep as much of their own money as possible. Conservatives look around the world at economies in North America and Asia and notice that countries with lower taxes generally have higher growth. Now, economists argue about cause and correlation, But we know that lower taxed economies have more energy, more dynamism and more innovation. And we know that's Britain's future too. Before I explain how we will bring down taxes, I start with some measures to make our system simpler and fairer. To discourage non-smokers from taking up vaping, we're today confirming the introduction of an excise duty on vaping products from October 26 and publishing a consultation on its design. Because vapes can also play a positive role in helping people quit smoking, we'll introduce a one-off increase in tobacco duty at the same time to maintain the financial incentive to choose vaping over smoking. I'll make a one-off adjustment to rates of air passenger duty on non-economy flights only to account for high inflation in recent years, and I'll provide HMRC with the resources they need to ensure everyone pays the tax they owe, leading to an increase in revenue collected of over £4.5 billion across the forecast period. Next, I turn to property taxation. In recent months, following tenacious representation from the honourable members for St Austell and Newquay, North Devon, cities of London and Westminster, Torbay and Truro and Falmouth, I have been looking closely at our furnished holiday lettings tax regime. I am concerned that this tax regime is creating a distortion, meaning there are not enough properties available for long-term rental by local people. So to make the tax system work better for local communities, I'm going to abolish the furnished holiday lettings regime. I've also been looking at stamp duty relief for people who purchase more than one dwelling in a single transaction, known as multiple dwellings relief. I see the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party paying close attention, given her multiple dwellings.
Order. Too much excitement. We haven't actually heard, because we can't hear what the Chancellor is trying to say. Okay, and I can hear who is shouting there. You won't get to speak later. Chancellor.
I'm sorry to disappoint her, but multiple dwellings relief was not actually designed for her, but intended to... It was intended to support investment in the private rented sector, but an external evaluation found no strong evidence that it had done so and that it was being regularly abused, so I'm going to abolish it. And finally, as part of this budget, both the Treasury, a part of our look on property taxation, both the Treasury and the OBR have looked at the costs associated with our current levels of capital gains tax on property. They have concluded that if we reduced the higher 28% rate that exists for residential property, we would in fact increase revenues because there would be more transactions. For the first time in history, both the Treasury and the OBR have discovered their inner Laffer curve. So today I'm going to reduce the higher rate of property capital gains tax from 28% to 24%. That really is for you, Angela.
Enough from over there, definitely not having it from here. Chancellor.
I now turn to oil and gas. Unlike the party opposite, we want to encourage investment in the North Sea, so we will retain generous investment allowances for the sector. We'll also legislate in the finance bill to abolish the energy profits levy should market prices fall to their historic norm for a sustained period of time. after representations from the Honourable Member for Banff and Buchan, that because the increase in energy prices caused by the Ukraine war is expected to last longer, so too will the sector's windfall profits. So I will extend the sunset on the energy profits levy for an additional year to 2029, raising £1.5 billion. Next, I turn to the taxes paid by those who are resident in the UK but not domiciled here for tax purposes. This is a category of people known as non-doms. Now, Nigel Lawson wanted to end the non-dom regime in his great tax reforming budget of 1988, which is where I suspect the Labour Party got the idea from. But I, too, have always believed that provided we protect the UK's attractiveness to international investors, those with the broadest shoulders should pay their fair share. After looking at the issue over many months, I've concluded that we can indeed introduce a system which is both fairer and remains competitive with other countries. So the government will abolish the current tax system for non-doms, get rid of the outdated concept of domicile, and I aim to please all sides of the House in all my budgets. And we will replace...
Order. This is impossible. Can you just... Order! Could you please shout more quietly? Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will replace the non-dom regime with a modern, simpler and fairer residency-based system. From April 25, new arrivals to the UK will not be required to pay any tax on foreign income and gains for their first 4 years of UK residency, a more generous regime than at present, and one of the most attractive offers in Europe. But after 4 years, those who continue to live in the UK will pay the same tax as other UK residents. Recognising the contribution of many of these individuals to our economy, we will put in place transitional arrangements for those benefiting from the current regime. That will include a 2-year period in which individuals will be encouraged to bring wealth earned overseas to the UK, where it can be spent and invested here, a measure that will attract onshore an additional £15 billion of foreign income and generate more than £1 billion of extra tax. Overall, abolishing non-dom status will raise £2.7 billion a year by the end of the forecast period. That is money the party opposite planned to use for spending increases, but today a Conservative government makes a different choice. We use that revenue to help cut taxes on working families. And many of those families, Madam Deputy Speaker, depend on child benefit. But the way we treat child benefit in the tax system is confusing and unfair. It's a lifeline for many parents because it helps with the additional costs associated with having children. And when it works, it's good for children, good for parents, and good for the economy because it helps people into work. But we currently withdraw child benefit when one parent earns over £50,000 a year. That means two parents earning £49,000 a year receive the benefit in full, but a household earning a lot less than that does not, if just one parent earns over £50,000. Today, I set out plans to end that unfairness. Doing so requires significant reform to the tax system, including allowing HMRC to collect household-level information. We'll therefore consult on moving the high-income child benefit charge to a household-based system to be introduced by April 2026. But because that is not a quick fix, I make two changes today to make the current system fairer. Following representations from my right honourable friends from Penistone and Stocksbridge, Carshalton and Wallington, Basset Law and West Worcestershire, along with many others, I confirm that from this April, the high-income child benefit charge threshold will be raised from £50,000 to £60,000. We will raise the top of the taper, at which it's withdrawn, to £80,000. That means no one earning under £60,000 will pay the charge, taking 170,000 families out of paying it altogether. And because of the higher taper and threshold, nearly 500,000 families with children will save an average of £1,300 next year. According to the OBR, this change will see an increase in hours amongst those already working to the equivalent of 10,000 more people entering the workforce. More investment, more jobs, better public service and lower tax. Deputy Speaker, there is one further set of changes I want to make today. The way we tax people's income is particularly unfair. If you get your income from having a job, you pay two types of tax: national insurance contributions and income tax. If you get it from other sources, you pay only one. This double taxation of work is unfair. The result is a complicated system that penalises work instead of encouraging it. If we are to build a high-wage, high-skill economy not dependent on migration, if we want to encourage people not in work to come back to work, we need a simpler, fairer tax system that makes work pay. That is why I cut national insurance contributions in the autumn. By reducing the penalty on work, the OBR said that tax cut would lead to the equivalent of 94,000 more people in work. In other words, it would fill more than 1 in 10 vacancies throughout the economy. Lower taxes, more jobs and higher growth.
He's saying the OBR approve, which is more than they did for Liz Truss. They weren't even consulted.
Today, because of the progress we have made bringing down inflation, because of the additional investment that is flowing into the economy, because we have a plan for better and more efficient public services, and because we have asked those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more.
Order. Mr. Perkins. I can manage, thank you very much. 5 times I've heard what you said. I let you away with it. Now that's enough. One more strike and you're out.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do know how hard it is for them to listen to arguments for lower taxes. But that is the difference. Because we have asked those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more, today I go further. From April the 6th, employee national insurance will be cut by another 2p from 10% to 8%. And self-employed national insurance will be cut from 8% to 6%. It means an additional £450 a year for the average employee, or £350 for someone self-employed. When combined with the autumn reductions, it means 27 million employees will get an average tax cut of £900 a year. 2 million self-employed will get a tax cut averaging £650. Changes that make our system simpler and fairer, and changes that grow our economy by rewarding work. The OBR say, when combined with the autumn reduction, our national insurance cuts will mean the equivalent of 200,000 more people in work, filling 1 in 5 vacancies, adding 0.4% to GDP and 0.4% to GDP per head. This is the second fiscal event where we've reduced employee and self-employed national insurance. We've cut it by 1/3 in 6 months without increasing borrowing, and without cutting spending on public services. That means the average earner in the UK now has the lowest effective personal tax rate since...
So almost everything that was leaked, which wasn't very much, the national insurance cut, the non-dom status cut. Well, the non-dom thing is something that Nigel Lawson wanted to abolish way back when, and now it's being abolished, but with qualifications and a cushioned transition, and the references throughout this budget speech to immigration. Hunt keeps going on about immigration. He doesn't offer any proposals. That's not his job. But he keeps mentioning immigration. I mean, that much. Some of the rhetoric in this speech was clearly written with an election in mind. But the speech itself doesn't come across as either an exciting budget or an election budget. It's offering harsher conditions for second home owners. It's offering a very modest tax giveaway. The Chancellor had very little headroom, and he's done what he could, but that's not really very much. I think he could have spent a lot of time making excuses. Thank God he didn't. He could have blamed everything on COVID. COVID cost the economy £500 billion. That's 15% of GDP. And you have to ask then, how much has Brexit cost the economy? I would say probably a similar amount. That's 30% of GDP that we are clawing back very slowly because of chaos in the last few years, in the last 5 years, chaos. And was that all the Conservatives' problem? Well, maybe it was, because another government might have responded to COVID differently, and a more sensible government probably would not have acted so manically, so hysterically, so absurdly to the Brexit referendum, whether it wanted to go ahead with Brexit or not. What we got was the worst of both worlds. And so I think Hunt has done relatively well, and he makes it very clear throughout that he's backed by the IMF and by the OBR, and that everything that he's done is sound with sound economic sense.
Their effective taxes are now lower than in America, France, Germany, or any G7 country, because Conservatives believe that making work pay is of the most fundamental importance. Because we believe that the double taxation of work is unfair, our long-term ambition is to end this unfairness when it is responsible, when it can be achieved without increasing borrowing, when it can be delivered without compromising high-quality public services. We will continue to cut national insurance as we have done today, so we truly make work pay. Madam Deputy Speaker, we stick to our plan with a budget for long-term growth. It delivers more investment, more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. But dynamism in an economy doesn't come from ministers in Whitehall. It comes from the grit and determination of people who take risks, work hard and innovate. Not government policies, but people power. It is to unleash people power that we today put this country back on the path to lower taxes. A plan to grow the economy versus no plan. A plan for better public services versus no plan. A plan to make work pay versus no plan. Growth up, jobs up, taxes down. I commend this statement to the House.
I hope you enjoyed the reference to the Laffer curve, which is about increasing tax rates beyond a certain point are counterproductive. It's an economic theory. It basically looks like a sort of bell shape. It's a curve. It's a curve. That's all you need to know. It's a curve in economics. And what else can we say? I suppose we could detour and talk about Marjorie Taylor. Have you seen the Marjorie Taylor Greene interview with what's her name? Emily Maitlis. Have you seen it? It's extraordinary where she's asking questions and then she finally ends up and says, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for those of you who don't know, is the Nadine Dorries of American politics. She's the Andrea Jenkins without the finger. And she was asked, should Nikki Haley step aside and let Mr. Trump sail into confrontation with Biden at the next presidential election without any form of qualification? Would Nikki Haley be a reasonable VP? Or would Marjorie Taylor Greene welcome the opportunity to be a VP? And then Emily Maitlis came in with the clincher. Why do so many people on the American right celebrate conspiracy theories? And she said, "Oh well, you're part of the left. You're the conspiracy theorist." And then Emily Maitlis added the point about this. Marjorie Taylor Greene had put out an idea that the California wildfire had been started by a bank owned by the Rothschilds with a laser, and it's both wild, conspiracy-based, and anti-Semitic. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's response was F off. So I suppose Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jeremy Hunt share a vocabulary, except Marjorie Taylor Greene filled in all the missing letters, whereas Mr. Hunt was a little bit more circumspect about the spelling of that word. But there we are. Laugh a curve. I sound like something I've called my bluff, don't I? But there we are.